E160 time. Now, don't know if you notice how much quieter that is, but it sounds incredibly quiet in comparison to the K130, so really quiet. So it's just kind of this, what I'm referring to as a low head speed mode. Now this has to be good for beginners, because if you're going to crash them, which we all do, the lower the head speed, the less damage you're going to do. It's as simple as that. You know, high head speed means fast rotating parts, lots of energy to be dissipated. So when it goes bang big time. So that's quite nice to fly around with. I'm flying in the 3G, not 6G mode. So I'll just do that. I'll just try a few pitch bumps now. Actually, now if you notice so you see that's quite mild. That was my full pitch. I go to my idle ones, a little bit more RPM. So quiet. Doesn't have the same stability perhaps at the lower RPM. Now, as you see on there, when you do a bigger pitch pump, the tail actually moves out and then kicks back again. So it's not solid. So we go to an idle 2 there. So much, this is more like the Eachine's recommended settings, so you can see it. The tail is actually better at that. So that is, the low head speed setting is definitely one of the issues. So in some ways it doesn't have quite as much immediate sort of zing as the K130, but it maintains it, it just keeps hauling. So back down to low head speed. Yeah, so with that low speed mode, just means that if you are going to crash, oh, woohoo, and a crash, bugger. Well, here we are, first real crash, low head speed, so I don't know if we can see on there, looks like some teeth missing out of the main gear. Around on the other side here and inside there we've broken a servo arm, which they seem to be a sort of a bit of a fuse point, and but otherwise just sort of looking along the blades there, it looks as though they look pretty good. So it looks as though the feathering shaft should be okay. Everything else looks pretty intact. It was a very slight bend on the tail blade, but touch wood. Considering I drove it into the dirt, that's not bad. It still wasn't full collective. Funny now, this feels almost touchy on collective after the 130. tail better, definitely better tail than the 130 without that drift. Quite disconcerting when you're learning to fly 3D and the tail's sort of moving around on you. So quiet too, low head speed. Nice, very nice. Righty ho, back to head into the slow revs. What a lovely helicopter. Summarising a little review of the E160 against the K130. I've had more than an hour and a quarter of flying time on this little guy now, and I have to say it is a bloody great little helicopter. It's an absolute rocket sport flying with 3D settings, seriously well, and much faster than the K130 in those conditions. I reckon it's a great 3D trainer because it's a lower head speed, and particularly because it's got that additional torque. It's actually easier for a learner, not as intimidating, and if your collective management's bad, then you get away with a lot more with it, whereas than the K130 the revs bog down, it loses thrust, plus it's also, it tends to feel almost a bit more touchy with that higher head speed. You know, potentially the K130 seems like a higher revving, more fragile beast. I do also like the fact that it's the E160 is very quiet, so it seems like the whole pinion meshing is a lot better, and the way the main motor runs, it's just quieter, smoother. Love the torque. I think that Eachine have done a really fantastic job with the match-up of this motor and the ESC on it, and with the battery as well. The combination of those just allows it to keep providing thrust, and that motor just refuses to bog under load. Overall, it seems to have a very highly engineered feel to it, pulling the helicopter, some of the parts apart, and feeling of the bearing movement and head movement and things like that. It just feels highly engineered, and it has a very sort of solid feel to it, which is very nice. Just highly enjoyable to fly. Crash survivability, I've had a couple of crashes, the more major one obviously with the main gear damage, and then with a servo link. The other crash, no damage whatsoever, so crash survivability appears to be good. But of course, in general, if you can try and avoid crashing, then that's the way to go. Compared to the little K110 here, and it's a great step up. It has some of the similar good flying characteristics of the K110, but of course bigger helicopter, much more powerful. So if you're looking for something to progress, if you can use the 110 as a bit of a almost like the simulator. But if you wanted to try things out in real life and out in the park and with a bit more zoom factor, then the E160 is a great step up from it. So I would say with the 160, this is actually the best helicopter I've ever purchased. The caveat to that is I do not have an OMP M1 or M2 helicopter, so I'm not comparing to those, but in terms of the other helicopters I've purchased, and over in the back here we've got the old 950, which probably goes down as being one of the bigger dogs that I've purchased along the way when you look at all the upgraded parts I've ended up putting into it to get it flying better. And so in general, if we go back to the 130 comparison, it's clear that these guys have the same DNA. It's an evolution of the K130 design, but it's just so much better. So the V1 was already better, it was already an improvement. And full credit to Eachine and to Banggood, because they've taken the feedback from the market and they've improved it substantially and addressed those issues of the V1. So that what we've got now is a really good flying little
little helicopter. So it's what I refer to as the doubly improved K130. Is it perfect? And the answer is no, it's not. I find that when I am spooling down, I'll click in a video into this in a moment, but when it's spooling down, if I don't drop the revs right down, the tail motor gives a kick if I hit throttle hold, which I don't like.
Same with that, if I hit the throttle hold, you get a sudden kick.
Yeah, and here's something that we've got to remember with these things. Drawn blood, when you hit the throttle hold on these, you get a rev out of the tail motor. So even though that was just the tail motor that did that, let alone the main blade. So got to remember, folks, got to be careful. You can't switch back to 6G in flight, so you can't initiate a rescue mode with this, and that's a fault that the K130 had as well. And I think particularly for the us learner 3D pilots, then that would be a very good feature to have. The blade grip bolt, I don't know whether it shows up on here, but there's just a bit of tolerance, so if you can see that movement there, so it flies alright with them like that, but it would just be nice if they used a different bolt on the blade grips that took that tolerance out of it. The pinion alignment, which I addressed earlier in the video, the colours aren't great for in terms of visibility. So it's pretty dark for me. I fly mostly against the dark tree background, so bright colours. Black blades don't show up. Black tail blades don't show up. So it'd be nice to have choice of some white blades. I believe there's some white skids available. So some of those things would be an advantage. The tail hold is okay, but it's probably one of the weaker points as far as I'm concerned. That the tail's not quite 100% on it. And it would be nice if you had a way, perhaps through the transmitter, as has been previously suggested, where you could adjust the tail gain on them. If you're running a low head speed mode, it'd be nice to crank the gain up a bit so that tail doesn't, as you pitch pump it, that tail doesn't just sort of move out and then kick back again as it recovers. Some of the rates and the agility of it, it actually feels pretty similar in terms of cyclic rates to the K130. I've been flying with the same settings, and they might be a bit low for the stick banging 3D brigade. So overall, it's not perfect, but it's bloody good. I'd highly recommend it, and again, credit to Eachine and Banggood for producing a bloody great little helicopter.